Well, this week we are talking about making disciples, really the heart and soul of what it means to be an everyday missionary. And for our purposes, I want to give a simple and clear definition for making disciples. Disciple making is entering into relationships to help people trust and follow Jesus. So when I talk about disciple making, I want to be clear that I'm both talking about sharing the gospel with people, helping people trust Jesus for the first time, and continuing to help them follow and obey Jesus after they're saved. We're going to begin by reading maybe the most important passage in the Bible on this topic, the Great Commission, Matthew chapter 28. And we're going to be reading some of Jesus' final instructions to his disciples. So let's read Matthew chapter 28, verses 18 through 20. Jesus says, "All authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe everything I have commanded you. And remember, I am with you always to the end of the age." Jesus gives his disciples an impossible task. Go and make disciples of all nations. Think about what Jesus is asking them to do. Reach everyone for the gospel. Have a gospel conversation with literally everyone. Equip and train them to obey his teachings. And what a daunting task for the disciples, who at this time numbered probably just a few dozen. How are they going to bring Jesus' message of hope to the ends of the earth? Was it even possible? Well, the crazy thing is they actually did it. If you study the early church, what you see is that Christianity exploded, and despite the fact that they had no phones or internet, the fastest possible travel was by horse, and that they endured extreme persecution, these original few dozen something disciples multiplied to over 35 million by 350 AD. In fact, by the end of the book of Acts, people were saying about Christians that they were turning the world upside down. How did they do it? How did these couple dozen fishermen and blue-collar guys and gals start a movement that is still changing the world today? The obvious answer, right from our text today, is they had the power and presence of Jesus. Jesus says it right in our passage that he had all the power and that he would be with them. The kind of power to change the world like the early church did can only come from Jesus. And the early church, through the indwelling of the Holy Spirit, had Jesus' power and presence with them. It was Jesus that motivated them. It was Jesus that sustained them. And it was Jesus who gave them success. And that's really the first truth I have for you today. Making disciples is fueled by Jesus' power alone. Go ahead and write that in your notes. Making disciples is fueled by Jesus' power alone. His power and presence is what drives his mission forward. The disciples were able to do it not because they were special, but because they had Jesus. And the good news is nothing has changed. You and I have access to the same Jesus through the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. He still has all the authority and power, and he is still present with those of us who are his followers. You and I can be people who turn the world upside down, not by our own strength or our own resources or our own political power, but because we have Jesus and his message of redemption and reconciliation, the gospel, which is still transforming people today. Maybe today you feel like, man, I don't know if I have Jesus' power in my life. You look around and you would say, I can't see evidence of Jesus' presence in my life. Hey, I totally understand where you are. In fact, I've been there many times. But I want to ask you something that has been convicting for me. Have you ever thought that the lack of Jesus' power and presence in your life may be because you are ignoring his mission? See, the truth is Jesus is active, and he is working, and he is present in 2022. But maybe you're not where the action is. I encourage you that if you want to see Jesus' power and presence like the early church did, you have to get involved with his mission. God's call on the life of every believer is to be his missionary in the world they're living in. So if we're fueled by Jesus, what do we need to go out and do? How do we continue the mission Jesus gave his disciples 2,000 years ago? Well, I want to look at something the Apostle Paul said, one of the greatest disciple makers to ever walk the earth, because I think it gives a glimpse into how the early church made disciples and really how Jesus modeled for us to make disciples. We're going to look at 2 Timothy verses 1 and 2. Paul is writing to Timothy right before he is about to die, giving him his final instructions on how to continue the work that Jesus had started. You therefore, my son, be strong in the grace that is in Christ Jesus. What you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, commit to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. Paul says to Timothy that he needs to teach faithful men who will be able to teach others also. I want to focus on this simple but profound statement. What Paul is talking about is disciple making. He is asking Timothy to make disciples who will be able to make other disciples. We have a buzzword for that. We call it multiplication. When you make disciples, that disciple should make more disciples. Multiplication is what Jesus modeled for us while he was on the earth, and what the early church practiced and the strategy they used to grow from a few dozen to 35 million. And that's the second truth I have for you today. The goal of disciple making is multiplication. The goal of disciple making is multiplication. Go ahead and write that down in your notes. We have to make disciples who will go out and make more disciples. This is really God's design for reaching the world. I want to give you a few things that are really good tools in disciple making, but are not the end goal. The goal of disciple making is not church attendance. Followers of Jesus should absolutely be in church, but making disciples has to go way deeper than church attendance. The goal of disciple making is not fixing people. We have to help people work through their issues, absolutely. But if they never take the next step in reaching other people, they're not actually living in obedience to Jesus. The goal of disciple making is not learning more about the Bible. That's a huge part of disciple making and absolutely a tool we have to use. But Bible knowledge in and of itself cannot be the end goal. The end goal of disciple making has to be sending out new disciples who will go out and make more disciples. If we stop short of this goal, we're really not fulfilling the mission that Jesus gave us. Remember, to go and make disciples of all nations. In fact, this is the very model that Jesus himself used. While he was on the earth, he did speak to large crowds, but the majority of his time was spent with his 12 disciples, preparing them to multiply, to go and make more disciples after his departure. And that's exactly what they did. All of them continued to go out and to multiply and make disciples who could make more disciples. And man, to me, this is actually so comforting, because I don't know about you, but I can't reach everyone on my own. I can reach a few, and I can multiply by training those few to go out and reach a few more. But if you're looking for a way to have massive impact for God's kingdom during your short life on this earth, you have to be a multiplier. You have to make disciples who can continue to make more disciples, maximizing the impact your life can have. I want to close today by proposing a math problem for you. There are 1.5 million people living in Palm Beach County, all around us. How long do you think it would take to reach everyone in Palm Beach County? Let's try to use this idea of multiplication to solve this problem. So let's say 100 people committed to making disciples who will make more disciples at a rate of 1 person a year. So the first year, these 100 reach 100 people. And the second year, those now 200 people reach 200 people. And the third year, the now 400 people reach 400 people, and they keep doubling like that each year. 14 years, the entire population of Palm Beach County, 1.5 million, would be reached. And if they kept going at year 18, they would have reached the entire population of the state of Florida, 22 million. And if they kept going in 22 years, they would reach well over 330 million, the population of the entire United States of America. Now, I say that to demonstrate the power of multiplication, making disciples who can make more disciples. If you have done any form of disciple making, you know that it is never that simple. And for some people, it can be a long process. But today, you can start making disciples. You can start telling people about Jesus. You can challenge other believers to reach people for Jesus. You can start multiplying today right in your small group. And our prayer is that as we depend on Jesus to fuel us to do His work and obey Him by making disciples, that He's gonna bless us and turn our world upside down through the power of the gospel.